Hi everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to go over part two, the next 10 questions of the practice AP US history exam. So I'm going to break down some of the stimulus-based questions and why the answers are what they are. So let's start with question 12. So we have a phrase here from Chief Justice Earl Warren. He exclaims, "We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal." So the question they're asking us is, which of the following was the most immediate result of the decision exerted? So this represents Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka when the doctrine separate but equal was overturned. So let's take a look. Radicals critiquing government actions is doing little to transform the racial status quo. Well, this reversal of the prior precedent set by the Supreme Court was a big step in ending segregation in the South. So this wouldn't necessarily be the correct choice. But let's keep it open. B, education advocates raised awareness of the effect of poverty. Brown Board of Education did not reflect on poverty. It was regarding racial segregation in Southern schools. So B is not going to be the correct answer. We have C, civil rights activists become increasingly divided. Well, that's not going to be the case. So we really have A and D. So segregationists in southern states temporarily closed many public schools in an effort to resist. It's going to be choice D. I know we went over this in the last session in part one, but I just wanted to reiterate it one more time. So this is going to be choice D. A lot of southern segregationists did not believe in this decision. They believed in separate but equal, so therefore it was choice D. So let's look at question 13. So the decision exerted most directly reflected a growing belief after the Second World War that the power of the federal government should be used to, well, defend traditional. Let's eliminate ones that we don't know. It's not going to be revitalizing cities. It's not going to foster economic opportunity. So the most likely answer here is going to be A. So it could be morality, but they're saying traditional. In this context, traditional would be to keep it separate but equal. So the best answer choice here is A, to promote greater racial justice, because this was a step in preventing or at least somewhat diminishing racial segregation in the South. So let's look at 14. The Brown decision reversed which of the following earlier decisions. Not any of these. You just got to kind of know it's Plessy versus Ferguson, which endorsed racial segregation laws. And if you see here, Brown versus Board of Education was regarding separate educational facilities. So just kind of use your context clues here. Endorse racial segregation laws. So it's not going to be B. It's not going to be A. They don't mention anything about it. It's going to be choice D. Okay. Now let's go to question 15. Okay. So the system of quotas was the first major pillar of the Immigration Act of 1924. The second provided for the exclusion of persons ineligible to citizenship. Ineligibility to citizenship and exclusion applied to the peoples of all the nations of East and South Asia. Nearly all Asians had already been excluded from immigration. The exclusion of persons ineligible to citizenship in 1924 completed Asiatic exclusion. Moreover, it codified the principle of racial exclusion into the main body of American immigration and naturalization law. So the first question they're asking is the Immigration Act of 1924 most directly reflected. So look at the first answer choice. Cultural tensions between scientific modernism and religious fundamentalism. There's nothing about religion here. It's not going to be choice A. There's nothing about African Americans. It's not going to be choice B. It's not going to be choice C because there's no mention of arts, cinema, mass media. So the only thing it could really be is social tensions emerging from the First World War. If you take a look at the context here, we have to remember in this time, in the 1920s, extremist groups such as the KKK began to rise in the United States around this time, especially prior to World War II, in between the ending of World War I, which was around 1918, and then the beginning of World War II, which started in 1939. So because of that, this is going to be our best answer choice, going to be choice D for 15. I'd say one of the best tips that you can look at, just see what they're talking about. And you try to eliminate two choices or one choice that just makes no sense. It's a good way of attacking a question if you don't know. So let's go to question 16. Okay, so which of the following evidence would best supports Nagai's argument? So let's take a look. So we got to look very closely here. So it doesn't mention anything about African Americans, so let's eliminate D. Diplomatic correspondence, increasing isolationism in the United States foreign policy in the 20s and 30s. Narratives describing the challenges of immigrant family life in the 20s, and census data showing the percentages of foreign-born population. So these three choices are all pretty plausible, but let's take a closer look at the reading. So they're establishing a system of quotas here, right? Specifically for East and South Asia. So it's the establishment of quotas. So let's get rid of B because it's not challenging the existing immigrant family life. It is preventing people from getting into the country to begin with. So we can eliminate choice B. So that leaves us with choice C and choice A. So isolationism is not exactly all in regards to immigration. Isolationism is more towards foreign policy and getting involved in foreign conflicts. So therefore, we're going to eliminate choice C. Our best bet is going to be choice A because a quota is instilled within a country to limit the immigration going into there. It limits the people coming in. So therefore, choice A is going to be our best bet because it's going to reflect the data will show us and not lie to us whether there are more immigrants coming to the United States or not. We have number 17. Let's take a look at the stimulus here. So President Truman goes, I believe that it must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures. I believe we must assist free peoples to work out their own destinies in their own way. I believe that our help should be primarily through economic and financial aid, which is essential to economic stability and orderly political processes. So Truman has a statement right here. He makes a statement. They want to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation. So this was in 1947. So look at the context here. So this is going to be regarding World War II with the Soviet Union. So let's take a look here. Creating alliances with recently decolonized nations. So the decolonized nations, not all of them, actually most of them, if we take a look at Africa or India, looking at the context, they were not controlled by communist powers. Many of the free colonies in Africa were not turning communist. Sure, they were anti-British and anti-imperialist, but not all of them were communist necessarily. So let's eliminate choice B. Choice C. So the United States is not engaging in isolationism. Rather, they're actually trying to help the outside world from subjugation. So this doesn't make sense for us to choice C. So there's also choice D. So that means avoiding a military confrontation with the Soviet Union. With the United States providing economic and financial aid, that could provoke a potential war because it goes against the Soviet agenda. So therefore, the United States is not necessarily avoiding a military confrontation with the Soviet Union. So that's going to be eliminating choice D. So it's going to be choice A, restraining communist military power and ideological influence. That is our best answer choice here. Because the United States is trying to support countries that have been war-torn and the Soviets are trying to take over. They're trying to eliminate the power of the communists, in particular within Eastern Europe. So then we look at the same context here. The United States didn't really have too many interests in the Middle East at the time. The Soviet Union was not getting involved in Latin America. That's on the other side of the world. Decolonization it's not really support for decolonization because the United States was, for the most part, pretty in favor of it, actually, later on in the 20th century. But so our best bet's going to be choice D. If we look here, they want to restrain communist military power and ideological influence. So our best answer choice is going to be D, to bolster non-communist nations, particularly in Europe. Okay. So we got question 19 here. Okay. So conditions like these shown contribute to which of the following? So passage of laws restricting immigration, increase in progressive reform activity, a decline in efforts to Americanize immigrants, and a weakening of labor unions. So labor unions were actually not weakened, they were actually strengthened due to poor working conditions. So let's eliminate choice D. We also have choice A, restricting immigration. So that's not a bad answer, because with overpopulation, with seeing how immigrants were being treated, yeah, you could argue that. But that's not the best answer necessarily. Immigration was restricted mainly due to the United States enacting quotas. This photo does not mean that quotas were necessarily instituted. So let's eliminate A. So we're going to have C and B. So this photo right here actually does not represent a decline in effort to Americanize immigrants. The reason for that is because America's goal was for the immigrants to eventually assimilate into American culture. That was never an intention of the United States government and their social policy. So we're going to eliminate C, so our choice is going to be choice B. The reason for that is because of poor working conditions, if we remember. Labor unions were established. Proper wages need to be established. We had laws preventing child labor. Because of situations like this, people living in tenement homes, and people just living a very, very bad lifestyle, these immigrant workers that came here with nothing. So our best answer choice is going to be B. Okay, we'll stop at around 23. Okay, so let's do question 20. So the conditions shown in the image depict which of the following trends in the 19th century. So the rise of settlement, house, and populace, that's not going to be it. Increased corruption. You could argue that. Let's just eliminate D because this photo does not have any African Americans. So it's going to be between A and C. So this doesn't necessarily represent corruption. You could argue that actually, because there's no regulation, and the corporations at the time were not being regulated at all, in the early 1900s in particular. But you do have to remember that the United States industrialized very, very quickly, and there weren't really any laws because the United States government cannot keep up with the pace of the economic growth. So it technically was not corruption because it was law. So therefore, our best bet's going to be choice A, gap between wealthy people and people living in poverty. So as the owners of these big factories hired more people, production went up, more advanced machinery, they made more money, and then the people working for them were paid no wage, barely any wages, enough for them to eat and have somewhere to live, but not to have a high quality of life. So because of that, the best answer choice here is going to be choice A. Okay, then we have 21. So advocates for individuals such as those shown in the image would have most likely agreed with which of the perspectives? So capitalism free of government regulation, we know that's not the case because of incidents like this, there was more regulation, as we saw here with question 19. So let's eliminate B. Plessy versus Ferguson, this is not related to segregation in schools, so A is not going to make any sense. C, natural selection, that's relating to social Darwinism. So I guess you could argue that, but then it says advocates for individuals. So the advocates for the workers are not going to support that. So our best bet is going to be choice D. The government needs to act to eliminate the worst abuses of industrial society. Okay, so let's do number 22. So this is regarding national parks, the Yosemite National Park. So it says, excepting only Yosemite, Hetch Hetchy is the most attractive and wonderful valley within the bounds of the Great Yosemite National Park and the best of all the campgrounds. People are now flocking to it. Oh, excuse me, Yosemite National Park. I apologize for that butchering. People are now flocking to it in ever-increasing numbers for health and recreation of body and mind. The walls are less sublime in height than those of Yosemite. Its groves, gardens, and broad. Spacious meadows are more beautiful and picturesque. Last year in October, I visited the valley with Mr. William Keith, the artist. He wandered about from view to view, enchanted, made 38 sketches, and enthusiastically declared that in varied picturesque beauty, Hetch Hetchy greatly surpassed Yosemite. It is one of God's best gifts and out to be faithfully guarded. So They ask, which of the following aspects of Muir's description expresses a major change in Americans' views of the natural environment? So let's take a look here. So take a look. Okay. So the idea that a mountainous scenery is more picturesque and beautiful, does it mention that? Just take a minute to read the answer choices. It's important. So he doesn't mention really anything about art, so let's eliminate A. Of divine creation. So they do mention a little bit about art here. And they do mention, so you could argue these two. But this is about Americans' views. This is not about his views in particular. So Americans eventually believed that wilderness needed to be preserved. We remember this. Theodore Roosevelt enacted legislation in order for this to occur. So our best bet, if we look at it from a foreign policy standpoint, sure, people might think that, but we have to look at it from a domestic policy standpoint. So our best answer choice is going to be C, because that way, so the idea that the government should preserve wilderness that will allow for evidence of divine creation and also for worthy subjects of artistic works. So the choice C is going to allow for the other two to happen. So therefore, C is going to be our best answer. And then we have our last question that we're going to do today, question 23. Muir's ideas were in direct relation to. Let's take a look. So increase in urban populations. So let's take a look. Religious refuge. This not really a case about this. So let's eliminate C and let's eliminate D. So yes, there was an increase in urban populations, and I can completely understand why people would pick that. But it's really, as the United States was industrializing, they needed more land, and a lot of big companies, they were neglecting the environment because there was no regulation enacted. So therefore, best answer choice is going to be A. So I'm going to make part 3 soon. It's going to cover 24 and 34. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.